Welcome back to Admit It with Alexis White. Today on the podcast, we've got a lot of stuff to kind of like break down. I want to talk about affirmative action, which is so, the Supreme Court ruling that was so 2023, now in the almost 2026 era. There seems to be a lot of chatter about this on social media. I'm seeing it on a lot of college counselors' feeds. There have been posts basically saying that students shouldn't write their college essays on anything having to do with race. Like they shouldn't touch race, cultural heritage, ethnic identity, anything like that in their personal statement. And I want to break that down because it feels, first of all, it feels scary to me. The ruling in general was very complex, and I think it's just disheartening. It was very complex and disheartening for so many reasons, but it's also funky because I think a lot of us don't really even understand what the history of affirmative action was or is, and how that plays into college admissions today, and what that looks like, and what it really means to get rid of affirmative action. Like, what are we actually talking about here? Are these counselors right in saying stay away from race completely? Why are they saying that? Okay, let's dive into this. I'm going to talk about my personal experience for a second. I applied to college in 1996, and I was the class of 1997 at my high school. So in 1996, that was when Proposition 209 was passed. Proposition 209 was a California ballot initiative that basically banned public institutions from considering race, religion, gender in any of their kind of hiring practices or admissions practices or whatever. So of course, this affected who? If you're in California, which is where this was, although there were other states that Michigan had a situation with it. The UC system, obviously, and the Cal State system. Those are our public higher education institutions, the four-year institutions. The UC schools had a 57% drop within, I think it was like the first 2 years of the Black population of students. This is wild. So when you walk around UCLA, most people are going to see a lot of white people and a lot of Asian people, and that's pretty much what's going on. And it's a very strange way to have a public education system where you are supposed to be surrounded by lots of different perspectives and lots of different visions of what life is or should be, or all of that is part of education in general, higher education, of course. And in particular, when you're at an institution that does research, this is part of the whole experience. And it's not just, obviously, there's race is considered, like I said, religion is considered, geographic diversity is considered. And a lot of times that geographic diversity plays into racial diversity. So in my personal experience, I saw it walking the streets of UCLA, walking the campus of UCLA, and you could literally, visually, it was impactful and uncomfortable and kind of strange, and it hasn't really changed. Affirmative action started basically during the civil rights movement. You had Kennedy and Johnson in the 60s basically saying that gender, race had to be considered, in particular in government institutions with hiring practices, in order to create more equitable access to jobs. And of course, that filtered into public education systems, et cetera. So that's kind of the first foundation of all of this. And then in subsequent years, each decade seems to have its own very big affirmative action case that lands. There was a landmark case in Michigan. There was a landmark case in Texas. And then we get to 2023, which is how this kind of all really goes down. And that's what everybody's actually talking about. So there's a Supreme Court ruling. Justice John Roberts, who is basically writing for the majority, he says that race-based admissions programs at Harvard and UNC. Now, those were the schools that were that the cases were brought against, that the race-based admissions programs at Harvard and UNC were unconstitutional. And the ruling basically ended race-conscious admissions across the board. And a lot of people think, oh, well, that only, applies to public universities. It doesn't. It's across the board for all U.S. colleges and universities, public and private. Okay. Obviously, there were a lot of dissenting opinions. The ruling won essentially 6-3, and here we are. What does this mean? It means that institutions can no longer explicitly consider race in admissions. But I keep mulling that over in my mind, and I'm like, but what does that actually look like? Okay, so let's rewind again. This was never about race quotas necessarily. It wasn't like the schools actually had like, we have to have X% of our students be Black and we have to have X% of our students be Latino. It didn't work like that. What happened was that a student's race would possibly tip the scales in favor of their application, especially if they were borderline or if they were below essentially what the average admissions kind of rate would be for that school. The fact that they had a racial identity that was majorly in the minority at that particular school would definitely be a highlight for that school in saying, okay, well, Joey has a 3.4 GPA. We're really looking at kids who have a 3.8, but... And that's kind of how that happened. But it wasn't like, oh, we're going to take Joey because we need one more kid who is blank. That conversation happened a lot actually at my high school, and I would say my high school was predominantly white. And there were very uncomfortable, strange instances where when the college admissions kind of situation rolled around, I remember we were seniors when certain people got into schools, perhaps early decision. I remember that we had the president of our senior class was Black and she got into Harvard. And I remember the grumblings and mumblings among the student body. There was a lot of she got in because she was Black conversation. It's pretty creepy and gross to hear people say things like that, in particular because the students at my school happened to be wildly accomplished and brilliant in all of their own rights. So I reflect on that a lot as a white student at that school, kind of thinking like, what does that even mean? And for a person to say that, is there actually truth to that? Was there truth to that in the admissions process? Not in that particular instance, but in general. So yes, in a sense, to tipping the scales. Okay. Absolutely. For the school sitting in the admissions office going, okay, we want to create a diverse student body. We feel that part of learning and part of education needs to be access to, again, different perspectives, different opinions, all of that. How does that happen? Well, it happens with international students, right? It happens with people from different races, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions, coming from different, small town, large city, North Dakota, San Diego. All these things make up essentially what is the microcosm that a university is, which is basically a city unto itself. I don't care if you go to Middlebury. I don't care if you go to UCLA. Middlebury is its own little biosphere. UCLA is practically its own country at this point. It's so giant. So how can you even put together an educational environment that is truly an educational environment if everybody looks the same? Now, I'm not saying if everybody looks the same, they're all from the same socioeconomic background or they're all from the same geographic background, et cetera, et cetera. But if for the most part, people have had the same learned experience or the same institutionalized experiences, how can you leave the school with any sort of real perspective on how are you even prepared to go into the workforce, understanding how to respect diverse perspectives, engage in difficult conversations, come to sort of middle ground. And I think we really saw this too, like on the college campuses after October 7th. How do we rectify this? Okay. So, and what does this even mean? Again, I'm going back to this concept and what does it look like now? Okay. So we find ourselves at the point where we're looking at these college applications. And of course, they're is the personal statement to contend with. And your personal statement is just that, right? Is a personal statement. It is an expression of your lived experience and what you have brought to the table, what you have learned, how are you going to impart that to your campus, et cetera, et cetera. And if we look at this as a sort of, if this is a space where race is not allowed, you really do shrink the ability to assess one's experience, right? So I could be somebody whose family is South Asian, okay? And one of the things that has really impacted me is perhaps cooking with my family, or traveling to that region, or speaking the language that has been an integral part of my family's history, or whatever it is, heritage, ethnicity, cultural identity. If I can't talk about that because that is what inspired a crucial aspect of what I want to study, or how I see the world, perhaps how I view everything from education to cycles of poverty to cycles of incarceration to all of the things that we're looking to essentially like activate among a student body to help be change makers and to help look at those things in a different way. Can I not do that? Is that off limits? What's happening on social media is counselors are saying, no, you cannot talk about race at all. Just don't even touch it. Now, why? Why are they saying that? They're saying that because there is a lot of fear that colleges are going to be sued, exactly as they were in 2023. Harvard and UNC sued for discriminating against white students in the admissions process. How could this make sense? If you write your essay about your Mexican-American heritage, impacting your view of the world, maybe having grandparents who are immigrants, maybe your parents are immigrants, maybe it's, deciding to learn Spanish later in your life, or whatever it is that something that's going to be looked upon with a side eye, or possibly trashed, because there's a chance that the school's going to go, I'm not touching this? I'm going to say yes and no. The ruling explicitly states and leaves room for applicants to discuss how race has shaped their experiences, and schools are allowed to consider this within the essays in terms of like personal qualities or hardships, just like you might write about a parent being sick, or your first job, okay, or the fact that skateboarding has influenced how you see the world. I mean, at that rate, you really cannot single race out as the one thing that you absolutely cannot touch, because there are so many aspects of one's life that influence their growth and who they are. So essentially what the Supreme Court said was, race, checking that box, cannot tip the scales. That cannot be the reason that a student is admitted. So essentially, there is room to discuss it in your application. Could it be tricky? I suppose. Could it be something that should be off limits? I have very strong feelings about that. After October 7th, I would say I had probably 100 people reach out to me, maybe more. My own clients, people on social media saying, should my kid talk about being Jewish in the essay? I don't think that my kid should talk about being Jewish in the essay. I think that. And what I said was, if that's a problem for the school that you're applying to, then you should not be attending that school, okay? That is not the school for you. If there is an anti-Semitic perspective among the admissions committee and among the sort of zeitgeist of your school overall, forget them. Find a school who's interested in you. But you're never going to write the essay just about being Jewish for being Jewish for Jewish sake. Like, that's not the point. The point is, how would your heritage essentially influence, like I keep saying, how you see the world, how you approach the world, how you approach other people, how you approach difficult discussions, how the food that you eat, the life that you live, the places you travel. That could be Judaism. That could be Christianity. That could be Islam. That could be a million different things that influence you. So you're not saying accept me or don't accept me because I'm Jewish. And that's what we're seeing here. We're not saying accept me or don't accept me because I'm Black. We're saying my Black experience, however it might have panned out in my life over the last 17 years, whether it's your grandparents, whether it's being biracial, whether it's experiencing racism, whether it's not experiencing racism, whether it's, digging deep into your family's history, whether it's learning something new. Again, that might have been sparked by your racial experience. But what it did was it ultimately led you down a whole kind of educational path or a path of growth. And that's what we want the essay to be about anyway. I never want my students' essays to be about their racial or ethnic identity. Boom, that's it. Like I'm Black here. That's not a good college essay, right? So these essays should be 90% about the influence on the student, kind of what they took from that and flying with that and making change in their school, making change in their neighborhood, extending things out into the community for however it looks. That's what the essay is about. The essay is not about, that's just the seedling. So I've never, ever, ever allowed my students or anybody who asked me for advice to just hang their hat on that thing. And I think that that's where we run into the issue. And no matter what side you're on, whether you feel that affirmative action should be a thing or shouldn't be a thing, at the end of the day, I don't think that anybody should be, relying on one aspect of their identity as a way to get anywhere, right? It's what have you done with the thing you've been given, the thing you never asked for? Okay, so again, could be a sick parent, could be growing up in poverty, could be living in an underserved neighborhood, attending a high school where you're bullied. I mean, whatever it is. What are you doing with the thing that you didn't ask for and making your life hopefully better? Or how did it screw up your life and then you tried to turn things around? So that's always how we want to approach things. Anyway, now, how have schools been dealing with this? And I think it's very interesting because I think that the message the schools are sending to students in a couched way. And this started in the 2024-2025 admission season. So this was just after the affirmative action ruling. A lot of schools had these kind of very generic why essays, right? Like why Miami? Why? I'm just making this up. Then those essays, pardon me while I sip my matcha. Then those essays became diversity essays. Within a year, I saw the what do you want to study here essay becoming things like SMU is a diverse and welcoming learning environment shaped by the convergence of ideas and cultures. How will your unique experiences enhance the university and how will you benefit from this community? Okay, don't tell me that isn't some sort of secret pathway forward to, okay, give it to us. If you're not comfortable writing about it in your personal statement, you can talk about it right here. So talk to me about your Mexican American heritage. Talk to me about how being, Christian, affects how you see the world and that you want to be a part of the Christian community on campus. Whatever. This is the invitation. Okay, it's the secret invite. It's almost like the password at the speakeasy door. Okay. University of Oregon values difference and we take pride in our diverse community. Please explain how you will share your experiences, values, and interests with our community. In what ways can you imagine offering your support to others? Okay, so I had a student who was South Asian who wrote for this essay about having experienced some really intense racism at his Catholic school, which was predominantly white. And he's Hindu. And anyway, he ends up turning that business around and basically he dives into the religious culture at school as somebody who's like, listen, I'm not Catholic, but I really do feel that these values are excellent pillars to live your life on, the compassion, service, all of that stuff. He starts leading their Kairos events, it was an all boys school. And it was the Kairos events at a Catholic school are like these retreats that they do where they talk about being vulnerable and they talk about their issues and their problems and all that stuff. He ends up leading one of those Kairoses. I mean, so this is a kid who starts at sort of in the belly of the beast with this very difficult, uncomfortable situation at school, and he turns it around. That's the essay we want to read. That essay is not about being South Asian. It's not about being Hindu. It's about facing discomfort and a challenge and moving through it, and hopefully along the way, educating people and learning something about yourself. So when you think about racial quotas and all that kind of stuff, you go, well, campuses need to be diverse. It's important. But it's also important to not rely on one thing for your acceptance. And I'm not saying that colleges did that. And I'm not saying that they were relying on one thing. There were a lot of other factors, right? They were still looking at grades. They were still looking at test scores. But again, did that tip the scale for a lot of schools? Yeah. And for a lot of schools, it needed to tip the scale. Again, you're not getting an education if you are walking around a predominantly white institution. You're not living in the real world. Okay, let's look at Princeton. Princeton values community, encourages students, faculty, staff, and leadership to engage in respectful conversations that can expand their perspectives and challenge their ideas and beliefs. As a prospective member of this community, reflect on how your lived experiences will impact the conversations you will have in the classroom, the dining hall, or other campus spaces. What lessons have you learned in life thus far? What will your classmates learn from you? In short, how has your lived experience shaped you? Okay. I also want to take the opportunity to address what happens when you are not a diverse student and you look at these essays and you're like, I don't have a diversity story to tell. I think what's really cool about these essays, and again, these are the supplemental essays. These are not the personal statements. So again, if you're uncomfortable about addressing ethnic identity or heritage or race or whatever in your personal statement, and I encourage you to always view that situation as a jumping off point, a seed, something that we move forward from, as far as like, this was the thing that I learned from this and it taught me to, or this is the thing that I observed from this and it taught me to blank, 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 and I did blank, blank, blank as a result of it. Okay. If you don't have diversity to talk about as far as skin color is concerned, as far as religion is concerned, and I have a lot of students who go, I don't know what I'm supposed to write for this. Guys, they keep saying learned experience, okay? There is diversity in hopefully everything that we encounter. There's diversity in opinion, political opinion. There's diversity in how we like to live our lives. I've had kids talk about how they were the only person in their family who exercised, okay? And that physical fitness was a crucial part of their identity while everybody else in their family was unhealthy and had diabetes and was overweight. And they were able to influence their family to be healthier. Okay, that is a different perspective than what you're growing up with. I mean, there are so many ways you can look at these essays that doesn't have to be exactly what you're seeing on the page. Let's look at Brown's. Students entering Brown often find that making their home on College Hill naturally invites reflection on where they came from. Share how an aspect of your growing up has inspired or challenged you, and what unique contributions this might allow you to make to the Brown community. So if we're not talking about a racial issue or an ethnic diversity issue, maybe you're talking about the fact that you're from a teeny tiny town with 400 people. And your town is a place where literally everybody knows each other. Everybody knows each other's names. Everybody knows each other's business. Everybody supports each other. And you want to bring that, that feeling, that kind of nucleus to the Brown community. You want to know everybody's name. You want to be somebody who shows everybody compassion in the way that your town showed a family compassion when their child was sick, or where they gathered at the church for, some sort of worship service to hopefully, change the course of something that was going on in the community. Okay, you want to be that person who brings that to campus. Fantastic. That's diversity in and of itself. So I think we have to start kind of, I'm not going to say leaning into this ruling because it's very unfortunate and uncomfortable, but it's also important to do what I've been doing this whole time, which is let's not see it as that one thing. We're not, again, not hanging our hat on that. That was the thing that sparked all the other things. So this idea of diversity, there's also so many ways to look at it. Could this possibly change with another lawsuit? Sure. This may very well change. Things might end up being really, really different. Do we think that this is going to kind of stay the course? I don't know. I do know that I would love to be able to walk around UCLA's campus at some point. And like I said, I never did. I was never able to walk around UCLA and see a lot of diversity because there just wasn't. And I feel like that was it's very limiting, especially when you know that a lot of people are coming to these schools who are from very small towns, who've, maybe never been to a big city where they've never, eaten ethnic food or they never met ethnic people. I mean, it's very disheartening. But how can we do it without people feeling like, oh, you got in because you are blank? That's definitely not the sentence I ever want to hear from anybody I'm associated with or anybody I work with, because that's not how we want to look at the world. Now I'm going to transition to the part of the show where I answer your questions. This is a very practical question, and it has to do with filling out your activities list on the Common Application and dealing with hours per week, weeks per year, that whole crazy thing that they have on there. Okay. How do you average it out? And it's really weird because sometimes, like, let's say you're on a team and you've got your varsity practice during the week, but then you also have games and maybe you've got tournaments and those are a lot of hours. But so maybe at some tournament you were there for, Saturday and Sunday, 9 hours a day. And that was 18 hours. But over 2 days, how do you average it all out? Well, you do exactly that. You kind of have to average it all out. Let's say you have 2 hours of practice a day, 5 days a week, that's 10 hours. We'll factor in some padding for games and tournaments. I would say 3 to 4 hours. And your school year is probably about 30 plus weeks a year. So, do that. Or maybe it's half the school year if you're on a club team. You kind of want to err on the conservative side. Don't start inflating your hours like a crazy person, because then the admissions people are going to go, girl, there is no way you spent, 75 hours a week doing this one activity. Like, it's not possible. I guess my point is there's no perfect way to do this. And you do just kind of have to alter things and shimmy things in a way so there's a little bit of padding. Let's say there's a big event that you do with a club twice a year, and that event generally takes you probably 25 hours of planning. But you're not doing it weekly. Maybe you're doing it sometimes it's 2 hours a week. Then all of a sudden there's 1 week where it's 25 hours. You're just going to have to say, I do it 25 hours a week, 2 weeks a year or 3 weeks a year. Add in that extra week to account for meetings. Nothing's perfect in this process. What can I tell you? This is a very good question. Can you talk about those kids with good grades, pretty good test scores that are looking for competitive, but not Ivies or top 25 schools? Those that are popular with good reputations, but attainable, like a 35 to 40% acceptance rate, narrow and deep on extracurriculars. What stands out? What stands out? What gets you past the AI round? I want to talk about that for a second. There is going to be, or there is now, an AI sort of, some schools are using it, some schools aren't, but they're doing an AI round of kind of like a gloss through. This is like what the UC schools used to do 150 years ago, not using technology, but it was sort of like, do you match the GPA? Do you match the this? Do you match the that? And what are the buzzwords that we're going to kind of pick up in order to actually read your application? I will always maintain that the backbone of your application should be your 5 adjectives that you use to describe yourself. Start with that. What is the essence of who you are? And what are your passions, your commitments, and your goals that illustrate that? If you can stay with the fact that, again, you're with the fact that, let's say you are somebody who's really forward thinking, you're a change maker, you're compassionate, you're enthusiastic, you're empathetic. If you have a few things that you do that are very, very indicative of those qualities, you're going to stand out. And what you're basically saying is, look, I have the grades. Like, I maybe could reach for one of those top 25s. I probably won't get in. But what if I want the 40% acceptance rate school? Really showcase that also through your supplemental essays. If the schools that you're talking about have a supplement, they have a strong why this essay or like we've been talking about, diversity essay, something where you can show me different sides of yourself. I want to see all of the sides of you. Do your research on the school. Get in deep on that why essay, because for them to know that you know what they offer is going to stand out football field lengths over other kids who just say, I want to go here because I like the size and I like the location. The question is, what score is too low to report to a test optional school? My son scored a 23, but a 26 in the math portion. He wants to keep testing for a higher score. Also, he's not sure if he should keep testing. He has a 3.9 weighted GPA with several honors courses and CCP classes on his transcript. Thank you. Okay. Best to take a look at what the average score is for those schools. And if he's hovering, at average or a little bit above, if he's hovering at average or a little bit above, great. If he's below average, I would not submit. So let's say they list their average as a 27 and he has a 23, I wouldn't submit. But if they list their average, let's say as a 22, and he's a 23, then I would definitely submit. So basically, if you're at average or above, do it. If you're below average, I would just not bother, especially if he's in the GPA range. Let's not muddy the waters here. That does it for this episode of Admit It with Alexis White. If you have more questions and you want me to discuss certain things on the next podcast, email us at admititwithalexis@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in to Admit It with Alexis White. If you're working on your college applications and want guidance every step of the way, visit alexiscollegeexpert.com to find resources and support tailored for you. For even more tips, stories, and college insights, make sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram @collegeexpert. Until next time, good luck, and remember, you don't have to do this alone.